Hey, Laura J. and Laura Marcos here on Conscious Conversations over coffee with a conversation about energy vampires and narcissism. Because we're living in a culture, which is the cult you are, that really promotes this fear-based way of feeding those who forget that they can have direct connection to source. So my friend, please. In your article that you wrote for Lead Up magazine, it is called How to Have Peace? Make Peace.
How to make peace with energy vampires.
Yes, how to make peace with energy vampires. So how do you do it?
Well, first, let me talk a little bit about the energy of vampirism. And it's hard for me to call anybody a vampire, so I just want to say that. But let's just say that it's any person or thing that drains you, that drains your life force energy. We call it chi, we call it prana, but you feel depleted after spending time engaging. It could even be a thought pattern. It could be, just a thought that really you play over and over again that makes you feel tired and disempowered. So with when we look at it as a thing, we could call it the thing of the news. The news is an energy vampire. COVID itself is definitely, we could look at it in this perspective as well as something that's really taking a lot of our time and energy and forcing us to question, how do we change it? And in the case of COVID, I do think it is a major gift for us to slow down and reevaluate so many things that are out of alignment. But yes, this energy of vampirism, how are we out of alignment, or as Laura just said so beautifully, disconnected from the source within us. So when we are with a person that feels vampiric, their awareness and their attention is predominantly on themselves versus that connection that we have when we're just with each other, right? Me and Laura here, we're sharing space, we're equals, we're going to be present. We're going to be giving each other eye contact. We're going to be paying attention to cues, going back and forth, checking in on how we're feeling. What are we doing together? Are we hiking? In this case, obviously we're doing this podcast. So when you spend time with somebody, there's an agreement, conscious or unconscious. So what is the agreement? So for example, in my work, I worked as a school counselor for 12 years in an inner city right outside New York, and held space for a lot of young people and their families. And that the agreement was, I'm here to serve you. So this is perfect. You have an open door to share the things that are going on in your heart and your mind so that we can work through them. Beautiful. That's not being an energy vampire. That's an agreement. I'm here to be of service to you, and you're the focus of attention. However, if I'm hanging out with a friend, then I want to hang out with a friend where it feels like we're equal, that there's a give and a take. There's an ability to flow in the receiving. But when we hang out with energy vampires, it doesn't feel so good because they're talking the entire time, or they're dominating the conversation. And there's, a number of ways that they can engage. But Laura, I want to give you a chance to jump in and share any thoughts that you might have on this kind of energy. Have you been engaging lately with any people that make you feel drained?
Yeah, absolutely. There are people that judge me because of what I do and how I do it. There are people that have negative opinions. There are people that have negative comments that are made to me or that are made to loved ones about me in order to dissuade me from doing what I'm doing, because it's just way too out there and nobody gives a shit. Right?
Okay,
No.
So you're feeling judgment, and then the way that you're perceiving their experience of you is draining your energy. Is that what's happening? Is it taken from you?
It could, if I wasn't aware of it.
Okay.
Other situations, ones that are that are more committed, those ones take more energy, because when you have a fundamental towards someone that you can't cut ties with, then that is definitely can be draining, but then it's just like how much time do you, it's just about spending less time with them, right? It's just like you may not be able to control who you spend all your time with if it's like out of obligation, but certainly you can, do your part to spend less time with the ones that make you feel worse and more with the ones that make you feel better.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of people doing absolutely nothing from a space of fear, guilt, shame, or obligation.
Mm-hmm.
It is not any fun, and we're actually disempowering the other person if we are hanging out with them or spending time with them because we feel that we have to, because they need us. Then that's a blind spot in our own ego that we need to be needed.
Right.
So there is a dynamic too that happens between people that maybe that are engaging in this in a depleting energy and the person they're hanging out with. And a lot of times healers, people that are very empathic, people that do a lot of work in service professions, we'll just allow ourselves to be the space holder for people. And the question will always come to the healer, how is it serving you? And one of my techniques, actually, because I do hold a lot of space, right? And sometimes people ask me, how do you hear people's problems all day? Well, for me, it's an honor. If somebody's really opening their heart and they feel that they safe, that they can trust me to share what's happening with them, I am, that for me is a joy. So let's go and dive deep into the subconscious patterns. Let's look at in the ocean and see what's happening. Where did it come from? How can we transmute it? That's work is my passion. But sometimes we are, feeding our own egos. Like, so I always have to check myself. Okay, where am I playing? I don't want to be the hero. I'm here. If I'm a good teacher, my job is to give your power back to you. So I'm, and one of the techniques that I do to maintain my energy is just one is stay in my heart, stay connected to my breath, and always ground. So I'm getting energy from the earth and bringing it up into my being, and also kind of creating a torus in my field. So energy comes up from the earth, from underneath my feet, up my spine, goes up above my crown, and goes out, so that I'm constantly imagining, because there's a relationship between thought and form, between our ideas and consciousness. And so we actually, just by imagining that, we're already shifting our energy field and healing ourselves as we do work. So that's just one technique that anyone can do, right? It's pretty simple. It's a visualization that I can engage while I'm here chatting with you. But these energies can be hard if they're people that we love, and if they're going more in that direction, like they're becoming more vampiric because they're becoming more unconscious, because their feelings are harder to deal with. So sometimes people can come in and out of that energy. Sometimes people are like solid, like not aware of their vibration. I'll give an example. So I host a retreat center, and say someone comes in and, there's a circle happening and work is being done and people are having group discussions. But if somebody comes in and says like, hi, I brought all these gifts, and they're not aware of all the energy, they're just not aware. And then they're going to continue to say like, hey, look, everybody come over here and see what I've got, and constantly bringing the attention back to them. So I recently, had an experience like that here in the retreat center that I manage in Sedona, and it was very difficult because it was constant. It was constant, like, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did, so that you can get the affirmation from other people while you're not aware of where they are at all. So they may be in their own process. They may be in silent meditation. They may be like having their own reflections while they're cooking. And here, so these kind of energies, it could also be somebody that's bullying you, somebody that doesn't let you make any decisions. And it's challenging because you may love the person. You may be related to that person. That you may be married to that person. You may be that person and just not even know it. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people are really just like, I would say unaware, not fully aware of their impact on another being. And that is what kind of is the tipping point in regards to human connections and this vampiric energy.
And as we speak about vampiric energy, then we have a tractor going past. How country of me. I apologize, but the option of sitting outdoors or inside just seems like a no-brainer. And with the amount of traffic that goes by now with the pandemic, or was it with an L for leadership, gone bad or weird? I don't know. I'm going to take it back. There is a lot of energy vampirism in all of what's happening on the world stage right now. So I know there are rabbit holes that people don't want to go down and that polarize people, and some people are not wanting that polarization. I'm just going to turn it around. Hey guys, awesome to have you guys on. The video with Laura and I on Zoom is going to be posted to YouTube after this as well. So you'll get a copy where we're both talking, but I'm just like, I feel the heat and the radiation of the phone, and it's like, I don't want to have a phone in my hand the entire time because of what's coming off of it. And I've already got a phone and like a computer in front of me too, and it's just like all of that. Like, talk about how technology is energy vampirism in itself.
For sure. I have shared with a few friends that since moving to Arizona, where there's just a lot of space, and I'm blessed. I live in Sedona. There's very little pollution here. So now my body's acclimated to the frequency here, so that when I fly back to New York City and I get off the plane, my body instantly kind of cringes because I'm now become more sensitive to how much electricity is in the air and all the EMF. It is definitely something that is pulling on our energy, and we may not be conscious of it. But I love that, Laura. Yeah, absolutely. You holding the phone is taking your energy away from being fully here, right? Because you're holding the phone and you're there, and it's okay. Please, it's all beautiful. But for us to really like be mindful, okay, so like, how am I carrying the container of my energy? How is my relationship with myself affecting me, as well as with in all my dynamics with the people that are in my life?
I forgot to post the code.
Well,
over to a friend that I would like to have on here as well, because I feel like there would be conversation that I just saw his name pop up over on Facebook. And so it's just like, ooh, sorry, there, sent now. So we may have a guest coming on.
Cool. So would you like me to share some more examples of energy vampire behaviors?
Yes, sure.
So a good indication is energy vampire is terrified of being alone. They need to be with people all the time. Can't be alone is like, oh my God, no, you've got to be with me because I can't be alone. So then there's that pattern that's sucking you in, right? They can, another thing that's I find vampiric is when people are just like, the world sucks, everybody, that's evil, we're in danger for gloom and doom, and they look at you like, if you don't believe in that same belief,
that's like the angry victim.
Yeah, it's definitely like a victimhood consciousness, but they really want to pull you in. And I really, around that energy, boundaries. I'm not trying to really engage that story because it's not my story. That's your story. I would love to help you make co-create a different story, but I'm not buying into that just because it's actually emotional fascism, and we do it to each other a lot more than we realize. Hello, Michael.
Laura. Welcome. So I wanted, Michael, you to have an opportunity to connect with Laura, and you guys know each other from the group as well. So we all connected in a group that ultimately we joined in order to connect and expand our tribe, and now have, right? And that's what life is about. So anyone that jumps onto here or jumps off of here and comes into somebody else's play, recognize that it's all just this giant universe that we're all part of, that we're all contributing to. And that energy vampires need the light ones to fuel them too. The more light that you have, the more of a target you become for the moths that are drawn to the flame out of the darkness, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So Michael, I was just sharing some examples of what may be a pattern for a person that's draining your prana, your life force. So I can share a couple more if you like.
Yeah, he's been over on Facebook too, but
Oh,
keep
good.
sharing. So he's not missed anything. He's just jumped
Excellent.
back on live.
Excellent. So in the example that I was sharing earlier, kindness can also be used. Oh, you're so nice. You're so pretty. Can you be my friend? I really need friends. You know, so like this energy of kind of like, you know, sometimes people like also overly hug. Sometimes they like come into the boundary, hugging and hanging on you. And I'm just like, yeah, no, please respect my personal space. So I also kind of find, and it could be really sweet, loving, kind people. It's not, you know, I'm really not passing that kind of judgment. They are sweet, but I don't like it. And it's being unaware of your impact on me. I love hugs, but let's make eye contact. Let's choose both and agree that this feels good. So sometimes I find, you know, people hang on you, and that I find that like draining.
Consent is everything.
Yeah.
Energy vampires have no sense of consent because they have no sense of boundaries, because they have no respect, and they have no ability to actually have empathy for the one that they're sucking from. They just want to suck. Oh, you're dry? Fuck you. And on to the next.
Right. Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. And I also find it could be vampiric if a person comes in with an agenda that there's no room for anyone else to speak. So say I'm hosting a meeting or a coaching call, and I have something that I need to say. If I use my authority to be above everybody, that doesn't leave any room for we, does it? Mm-mm. So that also can be very draining if you're exposed to that over and over again. So it, you know, especially for us that we're facilitators and coaches, we need to create safe spaces where everybody can feel seen and welcome. Because what ends up happening in the dynamic between the energy vampire and, let's say, the empath or the person they're sharing space with, is that it triggers the not feeling seen in the other. So if I'm hanging out with an energy vampire all the time and I'm having my personal experience and there's just no room, there's no room in the conversation for me to share what I think, what I feel, then I'm tired and I want to go home. I just spent, you know, a good 2 hours, you know. It's different if it's all about the agreement. Because if there's an agreement that I'm holding space for you because I'm teaching you how to create a remedy in the kitchen, I'm teaching you how to use your intuition, there's an agreement. That's good. This is great. You have my blessing and my permission. Tell me whatever you want. I love it. Let's go. I love to deep dive in unconscious patterns, but I'm your partner. I'm your equal. Yeah. But if I'm hanging out with you as a friend, I had somebody come over not too long ago, and they spoke for 2 hours without taking a breath. She was about, and she felt it because I'm just sitting like this very calmly. She almost left with an anxiety attack and I just and that was the medicine in that moment, that she needed to be witnessed in that way. So you're going to talk for 2 hours? Okay. Well, that I am not as motivated. So then it's not a friendship. Yeah. It's actually not a friendship. It's me holding space with an unconscious person. Yeah. So that's not any fun. So, yeah, I think what the underlying cause with all this energy is insecurity. So people put on these personas, right? They got to talk all the time. They got to have this fancy story. They got to tap dance. They got to show you how cool they are. And you're, okay.
So I felt like it was an overlap, but I wasn't fully sure as to whether energy vampires and narcissists were just variations of the same thing. And now I'm fully convinced, because even the language you described it with is the same as the video that I'd watched by Dr. Ramani Durvasula on YouTube, where she had shared about the 5 types of narcissists that I was going to share in this message, which makes sense now as to why we tie it together with an energy vampire report that is about how to make peace with the energy vampires who want to suck from the light that you are, because we are all light. And it's like, as you describe some of these patterns, it's like, wow, like I remember being in a relationship where it was like there was no space for me to have an opinion. It was just his way, or, you know, it was an alternative that was less favorable for me. And so my inner prostitute lived in her shadow for a really long time, and I love her for it. And then it taught my sacred prostitute how to awaken herself. And that's how you balance the shadow and the light. It's like you actually recognize how sacred you truly are, and that's when you can activate that light aspect of that same archetype, which is just a familiar pattern filled in with an energy that ultimately helps us learn a certain pattern, because we're just machines in physical form. And it's just like we have forgotten that we are the avatars our soul chose to be here in this life as. And instead we need to suck from other people instead of just go direct to the source from which we came, that we'll go back to, and that we only feel separate from when we stop praying and staying in the moment, which is what sacredness is, but we've lost touch with that.
Yes, for sure, all that is happening. But I want to ask you both how you feel about narcissism really being a survival mechanism. You know, because if we start to see them as really understanding that they have to project themselves in a certain way in order to be seen, to feel important, to survive, but in their brain it's survival. Like, yeah, they have to do, this is how they understand surviving, so that we can tap into our space of compassion for them as well as ourselves, right, as the space holders. Because does anyone want to speak to that, as, you know, a narcissism as a survival mechanism?
Survival mechanism? It's definitely a survival mechanism, but it's about recognizing that if you're willing to change your focus or your direction or what you're doing for the sake of the ones that need you to, you know, play their game and be on that survival level, they're in like a 3D experience and choosing that, compared to the 5D that we have a chance to go to if we're actually willing to do the inner work to master ourselves, which someone, generally speaking, that is so external fails to go within and then goes without.
For sure. And then how do we bridge that, Laura? You know, or Michael, how do we create a bridge, or do we create a bridge?
We become detached from the need to be the ones that did it. I would say to detach from the need for them to make it too, for the fact that there are going to be a lot of us that are going to be wiped out with what's coming. If you look at the Georgian Guidestones, if you look at Project 21, or if you look at Agenda 2030, all of these different, the Rockefeller Report, all of these things that are explaining perfectly what's happening right now, it's like they want to take the population down to 500 million. That means a lot of us are going to get exterminated. A lot of us are not going to be able to move out of survival. So if we meet them there now, when we have the capacity to be at thriving level compared to at survival level, then I feel like we give them an opportunity to raise their standard. Because what I think is that a lot of people have forgotten their co-creative nature. I think a lot of people have gotten so locked up into the narcissism of needing it to be about the 3D that they forgot about the 5D. And that's why the 5G is what's going to take over unless we actually step up and unite as empowered ones, instead of just ones that need to survive and be at that narcissistic level of being the one that's, and I understand I'm being narcissistic and maintaining conversation and having dominated for this moment, but I feel like there's a lot going on right now. And if we try to meet people where they're at, I understand that's the only way that you can actually help everyone, possibly. But then there's also the element of not everyone wants to be helped, and you can't help the ones that don't want to help themselves. And most narcissists don't, until they realize that they're a narcissist. So making information like this available so people can say like, maybe I'm a narcissist. And you know what? I've got characteristics. And vampirism, I definitely have sucked my fair share of joy out of other people and energy when I've needed to dominate. Totally own that. Like my poor father last May, like he got drained hard. because I just didn't know where else to turn to. And it was just like, I just like, oh, Dad, just like, help me, just like make it through. I just didn't feel connected to source at all. It was just like, I just needed him to tell me it was going to be all right and tell me what I needed to do, because what I was trying was taking so long, because I needed to marinate in it. But like, I needed him to be the one to try to plug me in, and I wasn't willing to do it for myself, which was like a pattern that I had to get to the point of actually owning, to the point of being able to change. But I think until people are willing to change the pattern, even when they see it, like I saw it in February and that's when I changed it. But like, I was very aware of it last May, when it first became very clear to me, when I was on a sacred sojourn and wouldn't let go of my limiting beliefs. And it's just like, I say, like, there's the narcissists that want to stay on the 3D level of reality, that's realistic evidence appearing legit and tomorrow is yesterday, that today really is. And then there's the people that are willing to actually be the change they seek in the world and step up and be that person that is willing to take a stand, I feel. And I feel like a lot of them are the ones that listen to these kind of calls.
For sure. And just to help any listeners that may be new to hearing this language of 3D and 5D and 3D, just to help, and please, I ask you all both to contribute any thoughts on this, but 3D being more of a reality where there's ego identification with beliefs. You are your beliefs. Like, so if, you know, you're a Yankee fan, God forbid, you are not a Yankee fan. You know, there's no separation between who they are and what they believe. And thoughts tend to be very black and white. And as we approach 5D, it becomes a lot more multidimensional. We see truths in different ways. We're able to work more fluidly to see what it is that a person is really saying, so that we're less attached to anything. And you did mention that in what you just shared, Laura, the importance of detachment. And I'm with you. I think that we really need to be detached to any outcomes, really stay true to the present moment. But the opportunity for growth comes for us when we choose how we're going to deal with this any vampiric energy in our life. So if it's the news and you realize it really is not serving your highest good and it's making you feel stressed and anxious, well, then let's take a break and look at that. Why is it why is it making you stressed and anxious? What is it speaking to? What is in your heart that would make you feel better? So turn the news off for a while, for example. But when it comes to people in our lives, family, co-workers, close friends, now what do we do? What do we do when we're in a relationship? And thank you so much, Laura, for being brave enough to share this moment that you had, this time that you had with your father, where you felt that you were draining him. So it really, that's the first, I feel that the first thing is really just bringing our feelings to awareness. So when we're in these dynamics of, say I'm in a relationship with somebody I care about, but feeling drained every time I talk to them, how long do I hold on before saying something? So for me, one thing I've gotten very good at is praying for the timing. I'll wait. There's been times I've waited 6 years to say something that I really wanted to say, because it was that important to me. And that friendship meant so much to me that I was willing to wait until the person's heart was truly willing to hear what I had to say. And now that's friendship, you know? So it's really
give them.
Huh?
How much time did you give them, though? Because that could have been martyrdom depending on how much time you gave them.
Well, you know, it was a really delicate dynamic, because this is like a over 25-year friendship. And I was holding on to some bullying dynamics that were still kind of popping up for me. And I never felt safe to share how I felt. Like, hey, this is how I felt. And I felt so unseen all those years. But I didn't think she would respond to me in a way that was non-defensive. So I waited. I waited for 6 years to tell her how I felt and how I felt unseen in this particular way. And and because I waited, she was like, oh my God, I totally see it. We hugged it out. It was beautiful. A lot of times you don't have to wait 6 years. A lot of times when you put in the prayer request to speak to somebody's heart, depending on the relationship, it could happen really fast. Sometimes it may take months. And sometimes we may decide that we don't need to share anything at all, that we can just let the river flow, Let the dynamics change and let the present moment reconcile everything through the law of least effort. We do nothing. That's also a really good approach. I'm not gonna, oh, you know, you're gonna come to my home and speak for 2 hours and not let anyone else get a breath in? Silence is a pretty powerful medicine. Silence is a pretty powerful medicine. So, and the woman got it. She talked for 2 hours and then she was like apologizing. She's like, I'm so sorry. I'm having a bad day. I'm having a breakdown. I don't know what I want in my life. And I'm like, thank you. That's exactly what was missing. You don't know what you want. So your unconscious dominated the last 2 hours of our time. So operating with intention. So with a vampiric energy, right? So if I'm gonna have to share space because I'm a facilitator. So sometimes people may be staying in my retreat home for 2 weeks. And now with COVID, people stayed longer. So I had a situation where I'm having long time people stay in my home to do healing work. And sometimes the person, this is the agreement. And I would be very, very clear at the door. This is exactly what the agreement is. Blank, blank, blank. And the person violates the agreement again and again, and you just, practice patience and you wait. This is what I would wait. So, and so it's what I do. You kind of just like do that. You smile.
Yeah.
And you wait.
Yeah.
And you say, sweetheart, this is what's happening in my body when you share that.
Right.
Very neutral. Not accusing anybody. I'm just sharing how I feel.
Yeah,
now, it gives them the opportunity to say, oh my goodness, is that how you're feeling? Okay. And now it opens the door for conversation. So really, like, it's important for us, if we are the one that's dealing with someone that's sucking or making us feel drained, when we get angry, I found myself, like, if I'm angry, there's been a lot of boundaries crossed. Like, now I'm like, okay, now I'm going to pray for the meeting, and then I'm going to be patient, but when can you fully sit and give me your undivided attention? Okay. And then you explain what happened and how it made you feel. And then you pause.
I want to share a Facebook comment. Isn't it funny that I actually interrupted you as you were saying, and wait. That was funny. I did want to also say about the fact that in our culture, we're not taught about how to actually interpret feelings or emotions. So that's a foreign concept for most people, especially because narcissism is so rich within our culture. It's literally not in their cells of recognition. And then if it's not in the culture either, how can we possibly blame them? So maybe it goes back to the question that you had asked about, people being at survival level of, 3D reality living and kind of operating from that level. And then it must not, because I lost my train of thought. Totally lost my train of thought in that moment. And I saw a dragonfly floating around, and it's like, that squirrel. And then you go down a rabbit hole and you end the thought that was going to be over there. But just the premise about feelings being a language that most people, especially ones in narcissistic culture, don't actually understand. It's not in their DNA, and then it's not in the culture. Where are they supposed to learn it? So I feel like having conversations where they can learn and talk about energy as a form of emotion in motion, really, like energy in motion, moving, actually flowing, and talking about where are you feeling things in your body, what's showing up for you, and then actually paying closer attention to that, because our organs are also reflective of different energies. So they will take on different energies if that part of the body, if that particular organ is the best one suited to contain those cells of dis-ease or disharmony within the body. Like if you've got disorder, shove it into the one room. So you shove it into that part of the body, and that's where the dis-ease shows up, because it loved you enough to hold that for you.
Yeah, very nice.
Changing your perspective entirely then of what dis-ease could mean for us, right?
Absolutely. And making dis-ease and looking at it as a gift. So what happens now that you're in this relationship where you're seeing like, oh, wow, what part of me needs this person to need me? Now you have the discomfort, the dis-ease, and you have the push to grow. And also deepen that, how beautiful that you can deepen that relationship. Because if that person can hear you and you can say, hey, sweetheart, you know, I feel like, you know, you speak 90% of the time and I don't get to share. And then all of a sudden the person's like, oh, I didn't even realize it. I'm so sorry. And now the friendship grows. So, you know, like it really is, we have to choose if we're going to, how we're going to, if we want to keep that person in our life, and not to be so quick to drop the bucket. Everyone, if you're breathing, you have a gift to give this world. God doesn't make any, or creator doesn't make any, you know, anything that isn't a miracle and precious. It's what we do with it now, what we do with this gift and how we can help each other's gifts. So I'm really trying to also advocate and be an ambassador. Don't cut the energy vampires off unless it's absolutely detrimental to your health and you don't have any hope that the relationship can shift or change. You know, we could talk a little bit more about that if you like, but I think that there are a lot of people that we can maybe bridge that gap with just by saying how we feel when we're calm, when we're able to show them like, my goodness, this relationship can go so far. We have so much potential as friends if both needs are heard. So this is what I'm feeling would make the relationship better. What do you think? And making it very conversational, using questions, just sharing, never saying, hey, you're an energy vampire, can't hang out with you, peace out. We don't, then we're creating separation, and then we're creating something we need to heal from.
I was just going to add, going back to the conversation about whether energy vampires are narcissists, and I'm no expert, but it's my understanding that there's a spectrum of narcissistic behavior, and that on one end of it, there actually is like some kind of diagnosis of a disorder or something, a narcissistic
personality disorder.
Yes, and it's my understanding when you talk about, so am I going to be able to be in relationship with this energy vampire? It's my understanding that at the very end of the spectrum, where someone is like a hopeless narcissist, and it goes back to what we were talking about awareness, waking up to the awareness of how we feel and how we feel in our body and where our energy is in the matrix and in relation with others. You know that from what I understand, a classic narcissist, they're not really sure that they're capable of that kind of waking up in awareness. They're like on this deep end of just being locked in that program of getting their, it's like getting a validation. They suck validation out of other people. They need to be uplifted and they need to be idolized and put on a pedestal. And I did work with this life coach because she works with recovery from codependency and narcissistic abuse. And it's typically like very empathic, codependent people that they initially try to get their validation from narcissistic types and then get lost in that. They just totally lose themselves to the energy vampire, right? And so,
I've done that.
And that was my historic, you know, I was the codependent that got into those kinds of relationships. And yeah, and she just said like her husband was, yeah, and the father of her kids ultimately was someone that she just had to, again, you know, typically those situations are what cause the people who can wake up to wake up, right? The pain from those kinds of relationships. And so it woke her up, and now she's helping all kinds of other people waking up, you know, coming to terms with how they showed up in those kinds of relationships, you know?
Yeah. Azriel Akiel over on Facebook, actually, earlier in our conversation, were we talking about twin flames? For whatever reason, I felt like this comment related to that, but I don't think that we were. I forget what we were talking about when she asked it, and that was when I had kind of made a comment, like, what do you mean? She said, because their threefold flame has been extinguished, as to why they feel like they can't plug in directly to source. I don't know what a threefold flame is.
I am not sure either, but and as to the spectrum, yeah, definitely there is. I agree there would be a spectrum. I want to say with the logical mind that there is hope for all beings. That is just a logical thing to say.
Sure.
However, it was the journey to be more fully in the heart. They say the longest journey, Jonathan England says this all the time, is the miles and miles, the thousands of miles from your head to your heart. Yeah, so yes, some people do transition and don't ever get to really fully know what that is, you know, so we want to make it contagious. I think one way that we want to, I'll never forget this amazing advice that I got from the vice principal of the school I used to work at. The first day of school, he comes up to me and he's like, you're going to want to spend all your time with the bad kids. He goes, the bad kids get a lot of attention. The honor roll students get a lot of attention. Go for the ones in the middle. They could go either way. They fall through the cracks. And I think that I'm really tuning into the butterfly effect, that if more of us start to have these conversations, if more of us model how to process our emotions, how to actually make peace with somebody that's draining our magnetic field, when we modeling this, let's make it fun. Because the people in the middle, they're going to want to come and have fun. So I really, again, I'm an ambassador. Let's make deep diving. Let's make healing fun. Let's make it a rite of passage to the next level of you. And that all of these were your gifts. Because I could say that, you know, all the times of my darkest hours, my anxieties, my depressions, all the struggles I had for decades, you know, and now are my tremendous gifts. Now they're my portals. So that, and I know that all of us feel that way. So let's make healing fun and light filled is the approach that I really want to take.
Amazing.
I like what Laura's been saying lately about as being a light worker and being strong in that energy, in that light, in your power, like as a lighthouse. Then we can't, like, I feel like I've been preparing for this moment forever. Like sometimes I feel like that this big 2x4 that's hitting right now is not necessarily my 2x4. It's like I'm just here kind of holding space for the chaos around me, you know? And that's kind of what I feel like and that's kind of what I hear, but my perspective of what you're saying sometimes, Laura, is that that's kind of what we need to focus on right now, is being a powerhouse of our own energy and being very aware of those energy shifts of what's showing up around us in what's happening today, so that we can be that, holding that space, and hopefully, like you say, pulling some of those middle people to us, like a mother or something, like the mother hen cuddling the little babies, you know, and teaching them how to get through this, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we absolutely have to support each other through the transition that requires me actually go through a liminal doorway, which is symbolic in and of itself, as I plug my self into a battery source that is not where I was expecting it. Have you ever been there?
Yes. And Laura, I was really excited to hear you say, I know we're coming up close to the hour, but yes. I would really love to hear the 5 types of narcissists.
Yes. All right. Let me plug okay. Ironically, this is actually, okay. So the timing, everything means something. We live in a world that is a combination of the literal, symbolic, mythic, and energetic. So we're talking about energy. You're seeing us in the 3D, and then I'm just gonna plug myself into the camera over here. And then in terms of these narcissists, the first one that I remember is the communal narcissist, the one that volunteers in order to be recognized and then tell everyone about all the things that they're doing, because then they get the accolades of that. So the one who does something publicly to get attention, deeply insecure, disguised by position, propaganda, and passionate defense of their BS. Whatever you want to say that means. Belief system being a very neutral ground. Malignant, toxic narcissist is another, which is taking advantage of people, manipulative and mean-spirited. Then there's the grandiose narcissist, which is referred to as the classical narcissist, which is a celebrity, one who brags, shows off, but not as mean. So this is the classical one. Then you also have the covert, vulnerable narcissist, whose failure to launch makes them seem vulnerable, hypersensitive to criticism, and have an edge to them. So they feel like the world is passing them by. They'll feel like the world owes them. They're the Eeyore types. And then you have the benign narcissist, who's very superficial, dismissive of others, fun to have at a party, but not depend on. So that's the one you definitely enjoy being with, but you can never count on, because as soon as you need them and they're not taking from you, they split or just don't show up. And then it says the DSM requires certain criteria, which are now changing on their diagnostic requirements. Narcissists either set their goals either too high or too low, so they can position themselves best. And then relationships are chosen for how they make them look and for overall personal gain. Their superficial choosing patterns are based on self, goal setting, empathy, and intimacy. They can't regulate themselves from the inside out. They don't have a good sense of their identity, and they're reliant on the world to tell them what they're about, and they're resentful of it. So the boxes to check for narcissistic personality disorder and PD there are 9 of them, but you only need 5 in order to actually receive the diagnosis. And people need to understand how important diagnoses are and how many boxes you check in the mental health system. So this is a completely separate topic. This is not one that Laura and I have ever talked about before. But when I was going through, for instance, with my own getting diagnosed with bipolar in that hospitalization experience, I was being warned by other patients as to what not to say, or not how to, not acknowledging that you hear voices or that you speak with God or have conversation with God because of how that would be perceived. I was kind of coached by some of the people that were actually already in the institution, because we were all just trying to get out because we didn't think that we needed to be in there. And it was maybe a psychotic episode that sent me in there, but it was narcissistic parents that had sent in another girl. Her narcissistic mother needed her to be unwell in order for the mother to get the attention. And I understand that from a cultural perspective. Narcissistic mothers do a tremendous amount of damage to empathetic children, or especially their daughters. Can you speak into that, Laura, from all of your training?
It's a very common pattern. I think what's happened to women over centuries of the essence of the divine wisdom, the psychic intuitive intelligence, the beauty that is woman has been suppressed for so long. I mean, women have taken a beating in every culture. I don't, what cultures are really honor women that we know of off the top of our heads. Yeah. So we're still healing the dynamic between females themselves knowing their worth. So the conditioning has been potent. The archetypes. The mother is, is the she sacrifices herself, and this is still very, very loud. She cleans, she cooks, she makes sure the kids make it to school on time. It's that's still very loud. And they find, Rutgers did a study beautifully that found that couples that are very democratic have a longer, have a better chance of having a long and healthy, happy marriage. If they share the responsibilities for the house, they're actually happier,
Yeah,
so there's a lot of, so what ends up happening is a lot of times there are these patterns that are passed on for generations, and mothers, sometimes there's a lot of different ways that this can play out, but it's very common that in order to feel safe, the mother needs to have a lot of control. So then the voice of the child ends up not being seen or heard. So, in my office and in my experiences working with families, very often it's common that the child just doesn't feel heard by the mother, because the mother is very busy telling the child what to think, what to feel, how to be, all the ways that they're wrong. So the pattern of not seeing, of just correcting the child constantly is how they understand being a good mother. Meanwhile, the child is losing their confidence, losing their self-esteem. So some cultures have this archetype more than others. Mm-hmm. I find, if you'll forgive me, I don't want to offend anyone, but very religious cultures, you know, there's a lot of, in Catholicism, it's guilt is very, very big, and Catholicism is very widespread. But the way that the stories are shared is very much guilt, shame. You did this because you're bad. And there's not a lot of emotional processing. So this very thing that you talked about earlier, that where do we learn how to process our emotions? Not in church, not in most churches. No, in most churches, we're all programmed how to think and how to feel. And it's very, very shame-based versus love-based. In way too many churches, and I've sat in many of them out of love. I go and I sit with a lot of different types of, I had to do that also as well for my master's degree in counseling. And I love it. I love to sit with different types of belief systems and find my focus is, what do we have in common? We all talk about love, but how are we celebrating love? Because the merit or the way that we should look at the effectivenesses of a religion is how effective it is in helping us love everyone. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and it's very German, by the way. There was a German philosopher that said children are to be seen and not heard. And we're still healing that. We are still healing that. The school system in itself is a structure that is based on, you sit, we're going to tell you exactly what to think, exactly what to put on the tests, exactly how to behave. You're going to move on the sound of the bell, and we're going to condition you like Pavlov's dog to believe that self-worth is this. And all of our systems are basically, are paradigms that work in a way that disempower the self to have social values where who's really in power, who's really in charge. And this is a great conversation to have.
Yeah, it's the tribe, right? And we'll talk about it another time, but just essentially it's the difference between the rogue one or the free thinker, the one that is willing to stand up for something and dare to be so bold as to think they can actually be the change they seek. And then all of the ones that come behind them, like the wave. My friend and I were talking earlier, and he was saying about how it's like, you are not the wave in the ocean. That's just, what you call Laura. But like that wave comes with everything and everyone that came before that wave. So all your ancestors are riding that same wave with you as you at the cusp. So if we think of ourselves as that wave, we're still not separate from the ocean, and yet we're individualized in our expression. And yet we're still going to return to the same place that we came from, possibly lose a little bit in the process, but essentially, we're not the wave and we're not the ocean, we're all of it. And energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only displaced. So we need to just continue educating ourselves about the fact that just because somebody's different doesn't mean we need to try to get them to change their ways to fit in with the tribe, to make the tribe feel safe. It's about, okay, so where are you at? But in a culture that is narcissistic at its foundation, in how it's been structured, the individual is just then seen as a threat because the narcissist needs to stay in control.
Very good point.
And maintain survival, which is staying in community, which is why it's so important for connections like this to happen.
For sure, sweetheart. And I see that Michael has to run. That's a beautiful point to end this program.
Thank you all so much. I enjoy being a part of the conversation. Y'all have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Amazing.
That great ending note there, Laura. Really good. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's connect another time. And thank you to everyone for tuning in this evening. And so we look forward to coming to you again to share deeper insights into what's happening and having conscious conversations about what matters. Laura, anything you want to share as a
Thank you so
final
much,
note?
Laura, for hosting the space and for your bravery always and having these courageous conversations. And thank you so much to everybody that's tuning in with us. We look forward to connecting some more.
Cool. Have a good one, guys.
Thank
Peace.
you.